One of my mentorship students recently asked a very powerful question. Why am I a porn addict? How did I end up like this? Here's an excerpt from my mentorship call where me and my assistant coach, Ricky, answer this question. And it goes a lot deeper than you might think. So stay tuned to the end. Let's get into it. Question came up I'm curious about. No rush. I get that porn addiction involves psychological, emotional wounds we haven't processed or healed. But how come these wounds are so unbearable for me that I got stuck in this addiction while, quote, normal people don't seem to have this issue? I get that certain traumatic incidents early in life can lead to it. You and Ricky have been very open of yours, but I never had anything like that. Even friends of mine who aren't the most socially or sexually active don't seem to have this problem. They're all happily married now. Everyone has childhood memories of their parents yelling at them or getting butthurt about going to church. Yet this doesn't lead to crippling addictions for them. Most people rely on caffeine, alcohol, weed, digital distractions, or maybe even porn, but it doesn't ever cross into the line into addiction like it does for me. So why are certain feelings so annoying for just me to deal with that I feel urge to use porn to numb them? Are processing these feelings just a very normal thing for everyone else? Was my brain wired wrong from the start? Curious if you have any thoughts on this. Thanks. Yeah, so there's a lot in this question. I'm going to do some Taoist thing, and I'm going to give you the end of the journey first, and then we'll go back to the beginning and then work our way there. The honest to God truth, I don't know. You will probably never know. And somehow we have to find a way to accept that. Like the donkey got in the ditch. We maybe can explain kind of how it got there, but I don't know. We were all drunk in the carriage while it happened. So the important thing moving forward is no matter how the donkey got in the ditch, it's time to get the donkey out. That's the end here. But there are some fruitful things as we go down this line of inquiry that can pop up. One, first and foremost, there's actually a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child. And it sounds very strange initially, but the book is opening us up to this concept that there is a wide variation in sensitivity among human beings, and that people who tend to develop addictions or who suffer from certain kinds of mental health issues or typical forms of life struggles, they seem to be born with a more sensitive nervous system. And it is actually the sensitivity of their nervous system that is both making them susceptible to the things that are damaging them, but it is also the very thing that is equipping them with their unique gifts. And so many people who struggle with addiction, I believe, fall under this category. There is a type of person where genetic predisposition is a real thing. I don't know if you've gone through your family tree, but typically various forms of addiction tend to run in families. So I don't know if you had any alcoholism runs in families, if you've never heard of that before. It's very true. And it's actually, we know scientifically that when you are traumatized or when you're addicted, it actually turns on various genes inside of your body that predispose your children. You pass on the genetic changes to your children, and it predisposes them to addiction or whatever. So to me, there's a study that was done, and it was looking at mothers who were traumatized. And they found that a woman enduring trauma actually gave birth to a child with a larger hypothalamus, which is the center of our brain responsible for negative emotion, a smaller prefrontal cortex, and more muscle mass in their hindquarters from the beginning. And so it's if the mother is experiencing trauma, they give birth to a child who is more sensitive to danger in the environment around them, and they're actually physically more equipped to handle that danger from the beginning. So epigenetics is a weird thing, but it's actually scientifically provable. So for me, I can look back at my history. This may not be true for you, but that's okay. My dad was both a porn addict and an alcoholic. And lo and behold, I'm a porn addict recovering. My sister got the alcoholism, apparently. And yeah, so the genetic thing is a component. The variation in people's sensitivity to negative emotion, literally the brain that you got given, the way your brain is special actually is probably influencing your vulnerability to having developed addiction. That seems to be, based on what we're observing scientifically, to be accurate. That more sensitive people who are more sensitive, higher openness to creativity, higher openness to certain things also makes you more open and more sensitive to developing addiction. It's there's no biological free lunch. The other thing that I would add on to that with is I would highly, highly, highly caution you against the special snowflake trap, that I'm the only person who's suffering from something serious and nobody else is like me. Like one of the things that I have realized, and I wrote about this very early on in the program when you guys read that mission about the greatest trap in life, right? The substandard adaptation. That by embarking on this journey, multiple things here. By embarking on this journey of recovery, you are connecting to a community and a source of wisdom that will elevate your quality of life high above the average person's average quality of life by virtue of the fact that you had an addiction and decided to get help for it. So someday you will look back on the very fact that you had an addiction, I believe, because I've had this experience, and you will in a weird way be grateful for it because it has equipped you to live a better life than the average person in the world is actually living. And so when we look around and we say other people aren't suffering from addiction, part of the other thing to realize is that many people do not have anything in their life that will adequately motivate them or provide them with enough pain to seek out a radically transformative source of wisdom and support. So most people, even if they don't have an addiction, are living, let's say most people, there's a lot of people in society who are living incredibly miserable, unfulfilling lives who don't have an addiction. And the other thing as well is like, for a long time, I carried a lot of shame over like, I've been single for so much longer of my life than other people around me. And one of the things that started to break that shame for me was when I realized that just because somebody was in a relationship doesn't mean they're living a better life than me, or that having a more meaningful life than me, or that even that they have healthier relationship skills than me. There's like what I've seen from a lot of people who got into relationships very young, for example, like the high school sweetheart couples, as they're approaching their mid to late 20s, early 30s, some gap starts to appear. Like I start to notice that in a lot of people who got locked into relationships when they were really young, it froze something inside of them in time. And some part of them stopped growing in a really important way. And actually, I experienced this in a very real way with one of my absolute best friends. He's been in a relationship since he was like 17. And he is like, I don't know, he was in his mid 20s. He's one of the most handsome guys that I've ever met in my life, just flat out. I know. Some people get it all, whatever. But he had no social skills. Like he walked out, like trying to go out and like meet girls, and he was incapable. Like he couldn't do it. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, all right, I've never been in that long of a relationship. That's not an opportunity that's been afforded to me. And I'm the guy that he's coming to for help. Like, oh, that's interesting. By virtue of the fact that I wasn't in a relationship my entire life, I got to grow in some really valuable ways that this guy never got to. And that's the truth. I know that's like painting abs on a pig or, painting lipstick on a pig. What's the French saying? Painting abs on a pig. Mix the two saying. Painting abs on a flabby gut or, putting lipstick on a pig. That's what I'm trying to say. But truly, when I look around me, there are a very small percentage of people who are in actually great relationships. There's a huge amount of people who are in very mediocre and quite frankly, bad relationships because they never dealt with their trauma. They never dealt with their shit. And then they found somebody else who didn't either. And then they both locked themselves in together. And so the reason that I'm sharing all this, rant number one is be careful who you're assuming is living a better life than you just because they have something you don't, or they appear to have something you don't. Because I guarantee you, like that guy that I mentioned that example that I just gave, he's looking at somebody like me. And right, this is the weird thing where like we always look at what other people have that we don't, and then we want it. He looks at me and he's like, I wish that I was able to go out and date with the freedom that you were able to. And so it's like, I have something he wants. He has something I want. It's like everybody just wants what they don't have. There's like a very, very true core element to that. So I would be very, very cautious in entertaining this. That is true. He texted. Yes, that is true. But I would be very, very, very cautious about entertaining the comparison mind frame. Sometimes comparison can be healthy. This is one thing. When we're comparing ourselves to somebody that we admire, when what's present is admiration instead of envy. When envy is present, this is very unhealthy comparison, and it's probably rooted in a lot of delusional thinking where we're imagining that this person is living this amazing kind of life that we want. I'll finish the rant off with this, then I want to hear Ricky's input on this and anybody else's. I watched an interview with Dan Bilzerian. If you're familiar with man, are you familiar? Yeah. Dan Bilzerian, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I'll give just like a quick crash course if you're not. He is ex-Navy SEAL. He's like incredibly handsome guy. He became an expert in poker, and he's won several $100 million playing poker. So the dude's super handsome. He's jacked. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. He has made hundreds of millions of dollars playing poker. Yeah, he knows the dude. Okay. And then he also basically set his goal in life to be like the most hedonistic man alive. And he's dating and like sleeping with all of these beautiful women. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars. He's got the yachts. And then you listen to him go on Joe Rogan, and he's not happy. Like, you listen to this guy talk about his experiences, and what he says is basically what happens is when every single meal in your life is a 5-star meal, the only place to go is down. That you adapt to that as your new normal. And then any experience that you have that isn't that is worse, because there isn't anything above it. Like, you don't get to have the 6-star meal. The 6-star, like, it doesn't exist. So what he actually did is he started riding the hedonic treadmill. And the hedonic treadmill is a recipe for misery in life, because what it does is you're running on a formula in your mind that says, if I get what I want, then I'll be happy. The purpose of my life is to get what I want. Now I got what I wanted. It didn't fill the hole in my soul. I'm still unsatisfied, and now I need more. Okay, now you got more. But like, the window of what's available to you is shrinking, and the window of what is now miserable is increasing. And you're on this treadmill, stair-stepping up slowly and slowly until you're Dan Bilzerian, and you're sitting there with the most materialistically successful life that maybe has ever been lived. And you say stuff like, it's just like, okay, like, we're unknowingly running on an equation for happiness that's going to make us miserable. And so again, the kind of getting back to the core point, Dan Bilzerian's got a lot of great things going on in his life. I'm not saying you shouldn't want things, but he very clearly set himself up for misery by not having the character to withstand his success. He didn't have the wisdom to remain happy in the face of success or materialistic success, because we think that's what success means, but the reality is that it actually becomes significantly harder to be happy the more materialistic success and fame comes to us. The more, like, Dan Bilzerian, he doesn't really get to ever experience in his life somebody treating him just like a normal person, because everybody wants him. Everybody wants something from him. Like, all the girls in his life, you think they're there just because like they like Dan Bilzerian? No, they're there because he has millions of people in his audience that he can impact directly. They're getting something from him. Everything becomes transaction, and there's no way he can stop it. Like, there's certain things when we look at people, we should make sure to accurately pinpoint what they're experiencing, including like all of good and all of the bad, and make sure that we are not mistaking that somebody is living this amazing life that they're not actually living. So, okay, rant one. Ricky, jump in.
Thanks for that. I'll start off just by simply saying that when we find ourselves in this situation and we look around and we see other people that might not necessarily be in this situation, that sucks. That's just really unfortunate for us. It sucks. And why in the world did it have to happen to us? And again, I don't know either with 100% accuracy. Of course, I can look back as you shared in the question and see things that I definitely think influenced it. But I don't think the single like the sexual abuse that I went through, I don't think that's the single thing that perpetrated this. I think there are a lot of other things that perpetrated this in my life as well. In the terms like, and I think Nate was talking about this in some level too, in different words, but if we think about like that sexual molestation that I went through being a big T trauma, like on a trauma scale, that 100 out of 100. So I'm already starting life off at a level 100. But there is something in the accounting department of trauma with little T trauma as well, where it's like a 1 or a 2 here, and a 3 or a 4 here, and like over a period of time, like that stuff definitely adds up as well. And I don't know that it was your experience, but based on the question, I was hearing like yelling and being forced to do things, and like all of these other things could potentially be a little T trauma thing, depending on how Cameron was receptive or perceived those things at that time. Even if like something happens to me and it's normal in my life and it doesn't do anything, if it happens to you and you receive it differently or perceive it differently or have that sensitivity differently that Nate was talking about, like it's going to mean something completely different. But I'll even make the argument that on a philosophical level, in a way, like we look at addiction, and when we get into recovery, we realize that addiction is the problem. That's That's just this diagnosable symptom that we see that causes a lot of pain and hurt in the world. And then on a philosophical level, I don't know that there aren't other things that do that as well, but they're not so abrasive or so explicitly destructive that they just loop into something like an addiction category, right? Like addiction affects society, affects culture, affects the people around them to a very, very strong degree. But I think to people who like have extreme road rage, right, there is something going on with that person. They might not be addicted to alcohol or addicted to porn, or right, but there's something going on at a core deep level with that person in the same way that I have core deep issues that I've had to work through, right? And they haven't worked through those things. So I don't know that addiction is the right word for that, but I think they're suffering something very similar, that a similar type of recovery work, healing that trauma and reaching into those core deep issues would certainly resolve and make their life experience better. So I honestly think that if we look at the population who suffers from addiction plus something like that, these strong resentments or strong jealousy or strong pride or whatever these other things that we might loop in there that kind of come from this core deep issue, there's probably a lot more people out there than we would ever even anticipate. And oftentimes, as Nate pointed out too, like we don't necessarily know the crap that's going on in their life behind closed doors or in their other experiences that we're just not exposed to.
Yeah, one of the other thing that I'll both tie this off on, and then we can move on to the workshop part of the call. The other thing that with Ricky was hitting on with the little t traumas, the other thing to consider is that trauma isn't always just what happened. Trauma is equally what didn't happen. And so I don't know what your experience was like growing up, but I can tell you some of the what didn't happen trauma for me was like I have never once in life gone to my dad for advice ever. I seriously don't think one time in my life I ever asked my dad for like emotional help. I think maybe I went to him to like solve some schoolwork problems when I was in elementary school. But the other thing too is that growing up, I don't think I ever once my parents loved me to death. It was just their capacity for understanding how to emotionally connect was not probably what I needed. Like especially with my dad, my dad, I don't think he ever once in my life actually sat down with me and just asked me how I was doing and actually meant it. Like I never got to be seen emotionally by my parents. They just thought like, shit was going on. My parents were getting divorced when I was like, 8, 9, 10, whatever. And I was just like, okay, my mom is trying to get her PhD. She's recovering from cancer. She's basically like 1.75 parents. I don't want to be a burden. So I will retreat. I will isolate. I will deal with my problems by myself. And then my parents look at me and they say, oh, Nate's so mature for his age. Look at him handling everything. Okay. They didn't have the knowledge that a 10-year-old cannot handle divorce. Like I was dissociating. I wasn't processing anything. And they didn't have that knowledge, right? So I can look back and I can see that a lot of the misconnections for me that I think I ended up looking for in porn it was all the emotional attunement and intimacy, healthy intimacy, emotional intimacy with my parents that I never got because I decided to cut myself off, isolate, and act like I was more mature and independent than any child can be. So that was my experience. You might look back over your childhood and see some similar patterns like that of like, oh, where did I not get, any kind of emotional intimacy or processing with an adult in relationship, co-regulation that probably I needed? And did I isolate myself away from that kind of intimacy because of something? That, as I've seen, has been a huge breeding ground for porn addiction.
A great example of what Dean is saying about like putting on your best face. I think it's so natural for us in all circumstances to paint this picture that we're fine, right? Like as Nate shared in one of our last calls, like I've been messaging people trying to explore and see how they're doing with porn struggle. And like the people that I message are not just out of the blue, right? They're people that are associated with the program and recovery, right? But yet they'll tell me like, oh yeah, I've been struggling with it a little bit. Like on some level, like that's BS, right? Like you're purposely putting yourself in this situation to see this content and be receptive to this, and it's just a little struggle. It's not a big deal. Like that's just like I think the epitome of it, right? Like even in these private DMs between this person who clearly understands like what you're going through, like it's I've been trying to stop. It's been going on for 20 years. I've had some success, but like come on, just call it what it is. You're struggling with it. It's over. It's taking control. But no, it's like always resorting back to putting on this perfect, as perfect of a face that somebody can.
There's useful things to be gathered in exploring how donkeys get stuck in ditches, but the real skill is knowing how to get them out. I would recommend going back. I need to think of what module this is in. I think it's addiction versus dependency. That module is really important because it's planting a really important seed inside of all of us. Like I just got like the alien visualization. It's like the little alien pod opens up. It's just and just flies in. It's like, instead of planting an alien inside of you, I'm trying to plant gratitude and a radically changed perspective on our situation, more in alignment with the truth. I really do believe that the greatest trap of life are people who never face adversity. They don't, when I see their capacity to be of service and to do important things and to make a larger impact in the world is very limited. For somebody who's never faced real adversity, like I actually, to give a concrete example of this, there's this one guy in the group who is funny because he actually he's almost like jealous of other people's struggles, where he's like, I didn't really have a traumatic childhood. And it's like, I just never really went through that much. And he was like, part of me, honestly, it makes me kind of scared because I don't know if I can handle stuff. Like I've been protected my entire life. So what somebody like that is suffering from is pretty fatal naivete. When shit hits the fan, they haven't experienced enough in their life previously to have cultivated the part of themselves that knows how to face very serious adversity and overcome it. They also don't have capacity for compassion and empathy with people who are struggling. It's not a good place to be. Yet we have this belief in our mind that because I suffered, somehow that's a really bad thing. And over time, one of the things that recovery will do, has done for me, and it's what I've seen it does for everybody, is it radically changes our relationship with suffering. So that we, the easiest way to describe it is that the 9th step promises and 12 steps word it this way, right? You will look back on your past and you will not wish to shut the door on it. And you will see that this is not out of the 9 step promises, but this is out of the big book, that your deepest darkness will become of infinite light to somebody else who is still struggling. I can stand here today and I can look at the things that I've, like the deepest forms of suffering that I've experienced. And there's a really weird feeling that I have sometimes where I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't be here doing this with you if I wasn't an addict. I wouldn't have any of this stuff to tell you if I wasn't a recovering addict. I wouldn't have any of the trauma healing stuff to know if I wasn't first wounded. I wouldn't have any of it. And I value this stuff so much. I'm like, I love that I get to do this. I love that I get to have these connections with people. I love that I get to have the experience of my life of people meeting me and being healed. And that's not me. That's something that happened to my suffering that gave me something to give. It's not mine. It's something I'm able to give away. And that there's a richness in my life now because of my suffering. And it's because of this path and because of the stuff that we're doing in this program that I'm able to experience that. Nothing had to change about my life for everything to change about my life. Nothing about my past had to change for the entire story of what happened to me and where it's heading into my future to be completely rewritten. And I think that's one of the messages of hope that we're given is like, nothing about where you are actually has to change. That's weird because we hate it. We're like, I hate what I've been through. I hate my suffering. I wish I didn't have it. I guarantee you, if you stick with this path, someday down the road, you're going to look back and you'll say, I wouldn't trade it. I can't tell you what that's going to look like because I don't know. But I prophesy, I predict, because I've seen it in everybody who follows this path, that it will happen. That the story of what you went through and what it means will change if you continue to do this work. That's the key. If you continue to seek healing. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was a call excerpt from my mentorship program where I take you and a small cohort of other guys through a comprehensive, total solution to the problem of porn addiction and help you level up in every other area of your life. So if you're struggling with porn and you're ready to stop falling flat on your face over and over and over again and get a real solution to this problem, I want you to go down into the description, click on the link, and book a call with me. No more tomorrows, no more this time's going to be different. No more spending a year of your life hoping this is finally going to be the year where something changes, only to have it be another year of more of the same. It's time to get rid of this soul-sucking parasite that is your porn addiction once and for all. So if you're ready to break free, book a call with me down below right now, and let's get this problem solved for good. I hope you got a lot of value out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.